Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be solving the paper May June 2014, paper 13. Now, if you're new to my channel or haven't subscribed, go and press the subscribe button and also press the bell icon so that you're aware of all the videos that I post so that you get all the notifications. Coming back, question number 1 says, one of the central themes of economics is that resources are scarce. What is certain from this? Now, usually when you're reading these MCQs, remember that when examiners frame these MCQs, it's sort of try to trap you between the words, it's sort of play around the words, and the purpose is sort of to confuse you as well. But you need to understand the mindset of the examiner. If someone is trying to confuse you, you have to be like, oh, I know what he or she wants out of me, how he or she is manipulating me into a trap. I don't need to fall for that. Right? So having that mindset right from the start would prevent you from doing these MCQs and making silly mistakes in these MCQs. So you need to calm down, relax, read all the answer options, make an informed choice. Okay. Now, what is certain from this? So, what is certain from this? Number one, what is certain is, oh, by the way, the answer has to be A for alpha. Difficult choices are unavoidable for economic. Obviously, they're unavoidable. You see, scarcity means resources are limited compared with unlimited ones, right? So economic agents have to make choices, and individuals, firms, and the government, they cannot have everything they want. So they must decide how to allocate these scarce resources. So that's what make A correct. Because difficult choices are unavoidable because scarcity creates an opportunity cost. That's why they're unavoidable. So choosing one option means giving up the next best alternative. Now others are wrong because food shortages will become for option B, scarcity does not necessarily mean that food shortages will worsen, right? Also C is incorrect. Resource allocation for option C, scarcity does not prove the price mechanism cannot be used. Got it? For option D, scarcity is again do not guarantee commodity prices would be rising, right? Question number 2 has been removed from the syllabus. It is a topic of transition to economies. Again, it's now not NAS anymore. Question number 3, based on the new syllabus that came in 2023. Question number 3 says a country is producing electrical goods and medicines at full capacity, and it either has to be on X or Y. An innovation is developed that enables the country to produce a new medicine which becomes in great demand. How would this be represented? So there's an innovation in medicines taking place, so definitely the productive capacity of medicines has to go outwards, right? So the correct answer has to be from X to Z. It has to be Charlie, right? A movement from X to Z, because you see the innovation is only taking place in medicine, so there has to be a pivotal shift, right? Nothing happens to the capacity. So you're producing the same electrical good. The maximum electrical goods that you can produce is still the same, but you can now produce more medicines because of innovation in medicine. So you move from X to Z. There's a productive capacity rise, or potential rise in medicines being the capacity in terms of capacity. So the productive capacity in medicines has increased. So you move from X to Z. The other options are wrong. A and B are wrong as well, because in A you have a movement W to X and a movement X to Y. This is incorrect. This is certainly not correct, because these are representing this is not representing a jump in productive capacity at all. Same goes for Y. Frame goes for option D. This is not a rise in productive capacity. These are just representing movements either inside the curve to the curve or movements along the curve. Anyways, question number 4, what would encourage the growth of the international division of labor? Now, international division of labor is simply countries specializing, right? So international division of labor means countries specialize in producing certain goods and trade with each other, internationally, by the way. So obviously based on competitive advantage theory. So the correct answer has to be A, because an improvement in transport system, because when transport systems would improve, it would reduce transport costs and delivery time, and this would make international trade very easy and cheaper as well. And as trade becomes easier and cheaper, countries would obviously more likely specialize in according to competitive advantage, which would again increase international division of labor and specialization. I mean, see for yourself, like if shipping goods across countries become cheaper, then firms could produce in firms could end up producing in specialized locations and then end up exporting globally. Now, I remember during our course, which is obviously part of the syllabus as well, we used to teach that if transport cost becomes very, very high, it sort of limits the theory of competitive advantage, because competitive advantage theory is not factoring in heavy transport costs. It's assuming that transport costs are very, very low, or they don't exist, right? So if very high transport cost then limits the advantages of competitive advantage theory. B is incorrect as well, because B is wrong, because unstable exchange rates creates uncertainty for exporters and importers, and this discourages international trade and specialization. Well, the question is asking what encourages international trade and specialization, right? So C is wrong as well, because restrictions on the movement of resources, because when you're restriction on the movement of resources sort of means immobility. So that would reduce the efficiency and make international specialization much, much harder. So D is also wrong, because tariffs discourage imports and they reduce international trade, which limits specialization. Question number 5, what would not cause a demand curve for foreign holidays to shift outwards? What would not cause? So again, this is a trap. So usually what happens is when students would end up reading this, they would not focus on the word not, because of the way how our brains are trained for paper 2. And we would end up marking what would cause a shift in demand, because that's how we have trained ourselves, right? So we need to unlearn and relearn for MCQs. Remember that. So what would not cause a demand curve for foreign holidays to shift to the left? And the answer has to be, the question is asking what would not shift the demand curve for foreign holidays to the left. So a shift occurs due to non-price factors, while a movement occurs due to the change in the price of the own good. So the correct answer has to be D for David, a rise in the price of foreign holidays, because a rise in the price of foreign holidays would mean that there would be a contraction in demand, right? Not a shift. Others are wrong, because a fall in disposable income would shift the demand for foreign holidays to the left. Option B is incorrect as well, a fall in the price of domestic holidays. This is incorrect, because domestic holidays are a substitute for foreign holidays, and if domestic holidays become cheaper, consumers would switch away from foreign holidays, shifting demand to the left. And C is incorrect as well, because more advertising for domestic holidays makes them more attractive, and as a result, consumers may substitute towards domestic holidays, so demand for foreign holidays could shift to the left. So all these are incorrect. Question number 6 says, the good has a unitary PD at a price of 25,000. What price must the firm charge? This is again a very much repeated MCQ. Total revenue is price times quantity. The revenue that you're making right now is $25 times 100,000 units, which is like 2.5 million, 2,500,000. What price must you charge if you want to sell 125,000 units? So again, total revenue is price times quantity. If you want a revenue of 2,500,000, what price must you charge for this? Right, so simply price times 125,000 equals to 2,500,000. Divide 2,500,000 by 125,000, you get the price, which should be 20, right? So question number 6, boy, the price has to be $20. And by the way, for PED equals to 1, and the reason why we equated, for PED, if you're selling, the point is that if you're changing the price, see, the price is $25 and you're selling 100,000 units. Now, if you reduce the price to $20, you end up selling 125,000 units, but the revenue would be the same for the firm, because that's the nature of unitary elasticity. When PD is equals to 1, unitary elastic. The revenue for the firm and expenditure for the consumer remains the same. Question number 7 says the diagram shows how a 10% increase in consumer income shifts the demand curve for good X from D to D1. The demand was falling and the incomes are rising. So this is showing that you have an inferior good. Now the income is going up by 10%. The formula for YD is so firstly, why are we applying the YD formula? Because you want to find out whether it's inelastic or inelastic. So this is normal. So this is definitely an inferior good. So A and B are incorrect. Why? Because when income goes up by 10%, the demand is falling from D to D1. The quantity is going down. So it's an inferior good. So either it has to be C or D. Now we are applying the YD formula to find out whether it's income elastic or inelastic. So percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. So percentage change in quantity demanded would be, you'll need to find that out. Again, you'll use the formula new minus old divided by old times 100. I'm sure you know this formula by now. This is used for percentage changes in quantity demanded or the percentage changes in price. So the new quantity minus old quantity divided by old quantity times 100. This gives you the percentage change in the quantity demanded, the numerator of the YD formula, divided by the percentage change in price, which is, the percentage change in, not the price, my bad, the percentage change in income. And the percentage change in income is, it's going up by 10%. So I don't know what so this has to 20 points. So yeah, so this is like in going to a decline of 20% divided by 10%, the answer has to be -2. So the correct answer is that it's income elastic. So it's an inferior good and it's income elastic because the magnitude of YD is greater than 1, the coefficient which is greater, so it's income elastic. Hence option C is correct, inferior income elastic. Question number 8 says a diagram shows a total relationship between a firm's total revenue and the quantity of goods sold. Now, just because you see an axis given via an x-axis and just because you see a straight line given, that doesn't always has to equate to demand. Not necessarily. I mean, you have to understand that economics models concepts, right? So it's you don't decipher a concept based on a model. You model a concept. You don't. Okay. So what you're saying is that this is quantity, this is revenue, right? And this is your total revenue line. So it's downward sloping, meaning that if the quantity is going up, your revenue is falling. Now, a quantity going up, revenue falling means that firm is selling more output. If you're selling more output, then why is revenue going down? It has to go up. So it means that what you must be doing is that your PD must be inelastic. Consumers are not really sensitive to price, and you're reducing the prices, and you're selling higher output, but not that much. The jump in output is relatively insignificant or less than the percentage fall in price, and as a result your total revenue is falling. We studied this rule for paper 2 that when PD is inelastic, when PD is less than 1, a reduction in price results in the quantity demanded going up by a relatively smaller proportion, and if this happens, total revenue will fall, right? So again, the PD is between 0 and 1. PD between 0 and 1 means it's greater than 0, less than 1. Greater than 0 means it's not perfectly inelastic, but less than 1 means it is not unitary elastic. So between 0 and 1 is the inelastic range. So the answer to question number 8 has to be B for boy, between 0 and 1. Right, so it simply means your PD is inelastic. So that's what. Okay. Now, question number 9 says a movement along the supply curve. A movement along the supply curve for a product is likely to occur if there's a rise in. A movement along the supply curve is likely to occur. So usually I would like, oh, they're saying a rise in, and then they've given these factors, right? So movement along the supply curve occurs. Now, how would if I was sitting in an exam scenario, before reading this, I would be like, oh, they're talking about a movement along the supply curve, and I would write some data points. Right? I would be like, oh, a movement along the supply curve occurs due to price changes. So they're like, I'm like price and quantity supplied. So okay, fine. But then what causes the price to change? Obviously the demand, right? So what happens is that when demand goes up, price goes up, or demand goes down, price goes down, and that causes an extension. So the price changes cause an extension or contraction in supply. But then what causes the price to change if there's an extension or contraction in supply? Obviously demand is changing, right? So demand could go up or down, right? In this question, obviously the answer has to be A, the demand for complementary goods is rising. Because when the demand for complementary goods rises, let's say car and petrol, and if the demand for cars goes up, then the demand for petrol will go up. And let's say this is the petrol market. Let's say this is the demand for petrol, and the demand for petrol will go up, and that would cause an extension in the supply of petrol, because or rise in the quantity or extension. More petrol is supplied now because of a higher price, because of a higher demand, and that causes a jump in price, which causes petrol suppliers to produce and sell more, supply more petrol, right? So others are wrong. Why? Because the a rise in distribution cost. If distribution cost goes up, that would cause the supply curve to shift to the left. That is again a non-price. I mean, we are talking about extension in supply or contraction in supply, not shifts in supply. Subsidy would shift supply curve to the left as well. This is incorrect. The wages of employees who produce the product, if this rises, cost of production goes up. In all these cases, it affects the cost of production either going up or down, which shifts the supply curve either to the right or left accordingly. Okay, question number 10 says a firm makes televisions. What does elasticity of supply for the firm represent? Now, elasticity of supply, again, I would be like, oh, it's a question of elasticity of supply. Immediately before reading the answer options, I would be like, oh, PES. Okay, it's talking about the responsiveness of firms. Okay, fine. So I would be like, okay, fine. So it's not necessary that you always start reading from the above. You could sort of maybe look at option D. So let's look at option D. I guess option D is the answer to the question. So let's look at option number C. The speed at which additional fixed factors used to produce televisions can be obtained. And I'm like, so for this question, you need to read all the options because the answer is not written on the face of it. So for such questions, usually takes time and probably can take some time. I mean, I mean, for a question like this, look at this question. This is like a pretty straightforward question. This will take you like what, 30 seconds? But this might not take you 30 seconds. Maybe it might take you a minute or something, or maybe 1.5 minutes or something, right? So, so it's instead, and I'll teach you later on as well that how to solve the. So this is the question that you shouldn't be solving immediately because it requires a lot of answer options to go through, right? So there's a high chance that you might end up selecting the wrong answer. But I haven't really read the question right now, but if this is the right answer, I mean, if this is a question that is, let's say, a bit technical, then you probably should be doing it at the end. So firm makes televisions. What does elasticity of supply for the firm represent? So elasticity represents the speed at which additional fixed factors used to produce televisions can be obtained. Option C is again incorrect because option C relates to one factor that affects the elasticity of supply, but again, it's not the definition itself. The speed at which additional fixed factors used to produce televisions can be obtained. This is again a factor affecting PES. So the high, I mean, if we can obtain these fixed factors at a very high speed, again, the PES, because fixed factors are representing fixed inputs and resources. So PES would be elastic, more responsive, right? So this is again a factor affecting elasticity, not elasticity definition itself. See, they're asking what does elasticity for the firm is representing. So it would technically, ideally, it should be like how the firm, how much the firm is able to produce and sell more, supply more televisions due to price changes. So which is actually answered option D is the right answer. But look, if you look at answer option A, it says a need to increase production because of a successful advertising campaign. Now, again, advertising has to do with demand, so nothing to do with supply responsiveness. So again, this is incorrect. The possibility of switching production from other goods the firm makes to televisions. So this may affect supply, but it is not the definition of elasticity. So this is representing how quickly you can switch the production from other goods, maybe talking about the mobility of resources and the fact that it's sort of product mobility. It's sort of representing how quickly you can switch the production of good A to good B, good B to good A. And this again is a factor affecting elasticity, so this is incorrect as well. Answer option A is the right answer. The way the firm's production changes as a result of the change in the price of televisions. But I said this is an MCQ should be doing at the end, but you see, when I looked at the answer MCQ options right now, this seemed pretty easy. But what I'm saying is that, again, for this MCQ, you would need to read all the answer options. And these answer options are very theoretical. So since this was an easy MCQ, but sometimes MCQs could be more trickier, right? And they could demand more of concentration. So in that context, maybe, circling the MCQ and doing it later on would be a better idea. And why am I saying this? This would be taught later on in the streams as well, and I'll teach you that, don't worry. Now question number 11 says demand and supply in a competitive market both decrease by 10% at all prices. What will be the effect on the equilibrium price and quantity sold? Okay, so usually this sort of MCQs do come in the exam, and for these MCQs you need to understand that for instance, let's say if the demand and supply is both is decreasing by the same magnitude or the same extent. So if demand goes down, one thing's for sure, the quantity goes down. If supply goes down, the quantity goes down as well. So one thing's for sure, that quantity has to go down. So quantity has to decrease, right? So it will decrease by 10%, right? So it either has to be A or it has to be debit. So it can't be B or C. So we cancel out B and C. So we reduce our options and make life easy for us. Let's see what will be the impact on price. If demand goes down, price goes down. If supply goes down, price goes up. Now, the final impact on price is sort of uncertain or indeterminable, because the reason is that the price is not even indeterminable. My bad. The price is unchanged. Because we can't really, usually in paper 2 we used to say it depends upon the magnitude of the shift in demand and supply. Well, yeah, here the magnitude is already given. It says that both are decreasing by the same percentage. So if both are decreasing by the same percentage, the magnitude is the same. And in that case, the impact on price is that price will remain unchanged. So the decrease in price will be offset by the increase in price. And diagrammatically, we'll show this by drawing the demand supply diagram, where you shift the demand diagram. And so this was your original price, right? Original price and quantity. So you shift the demand to the left, and then your supply shifts to the left as well. So price remains unchanged. Both are falling by 10%, but quantity goes down. Yeah. So quantity goes down by 10%, and there's no change in price, so it should be D for David. And just think of it simply like buyers want 10%, so demand goes down, buyers want 10% less at every price. Similarly, sellers supply 10% less at every price. Since both sides, demand and supply, shrink or reduce equally, there is no pressure for prices to change, but obviously fewer units will be traded in the market. So 11, David. Question number 12 says the graph shows annual percentage changes in the price of new houses and existing houses in the United Kingdom between 2010 and 2011. This is a very common question. Usually these sort of questions come where they give you rate of changes. These are not absolute prices, these are rate of changes. So the rate of change of house prices for new houses, existing houses are given. What can be concluded from the graph? So this sort of question, one question usually comes like this: what can be concluded from the graph? Okay. And so again, this is a question that requires careful assessment of all the answer options. Question number 12, if you look at answer option A, in the period after October 2010, new houses were more expensive than existing houses. So after 2010, new houses were more expensive than. This is wrong because the graph does not show actual prices, so we can't really say new houses were more expensive than existing houses. Although new houses, if you see, the rate of the price change is falling, and while the rate of the, because this has gone into negative as well, while this is actually in positive, but that again isn't showing absolute prices. You need to understand this. This is not absolute price change. These are rate of changes, right? So new houses were more expensive than existing houses. You cannot decipher this because this is, the graph is showing percentage changes, not absolute changes. Right? These are not actual house prices, changes in actual house prices. B is also wrong because in the period until Jan 2011, there was a steady fall in the price of existing houses. Jan 2011, again, same thing, because, okay, so there was a steady fall in the price of existing houses, right? So yes, there is a fall in the rate of the price. I mean, the rate of the price, that is, the rate of increase in existing house prices is going down. It's going down, down. So this is wrong because a fall in the percentage change does not mean that prices are falling. Prices fall only when the percentage change is negative. So existing house prices are falling in this region. Remember that. Okay. When the rate of change becomes negative. Okay. But still you cannot differentiate between new houses were more expensive than existing houses. You cannot figure that out because the prices are not given for actual new houses and existing houses. Maybe existing houses, maybe new houses were cheaper than existing houses. So even if the rate of change goes into negative and house prices starts falling, still existing houses could be much expensive than new houses because new houses were way too cheaper than existing houses initially. So these are not absolute prices given, no. This is not absolute price. This is not, you don't got it. So option C is wrong as well. It says average price of existing house was lower in March 2012 than 2 years earlier. It's wrong because the graph alone does not prove that the average price of existing house was lower in March 2012 than 2 years earlier. March 2012 is this value. So in March 2012, if you look at, it says the average price of existing house was lower in March 2012 than 2 years earlier. Now, see, the point is that in March 2012, the rate of increase in the price of new houses was close to, let's say, approximately 5%. While, 2 years earlier, maybe the rate was higher. Right? But again, the point is that if you look at March 2012, the rate could probably, if you look at March 2 years back, the rate could be higher. But then again, it's wrong because the graph alone is not proving that the average price of existing houses was lower in March 12 than 2 years earlier, because it's not, absolute prices not given. Now, the average price of existing houses were lower in March 2000. Option D says the price of new houses continue to rise throughout the period. This is correct because it's not asking us to compare whether price was higher or lower. It's just saying that the price continued to rise throughout the period, which is actually correct. Why? Because you see, the price of new houses is continuing to rise throughout, and the reason is that the line for the new house, if you look at the line for the new house, the the percentage rise in the price is going up and down and up and down. It's sort of quite unstable. Sometimes going up and down, but just because the rate is going down, the price of new houses is not falling. The price is still rising at a decreasing rate. So prices of new houses continue to rise throughout this period because it was above zero. It was in a positive range. It continued to rise throughout the period, even if the rate increased, even if the rate of increase was going down. Right? So just because the rate of increase in house prices was falling doesn't mean that houses get to become cheaper. It's just that the price of the rise in the house was slowing down, that's all. But prices for houses were still rising because percentage change in prices was positive. So house prices weren't really falling. Got it? That's why it says the price of new houses continue to rise throughout the period. This makes perfect sense, and this is what you'll conclude. So you conclude about this. So you don't conclude about actual prices. The data doesn't show the actual prices. So these sort of questions usually students get wrong. But once you know that this is not actual price, this is a percentage change, it's not absolute prices, then you will get the hang of it. Question 13 says between 2006 and 7, the price of skimmed milk powder on the world market rose from $1,000 to 2,400 ton. Assuming the market is a free market, what will result? So if the market price is rising and higher prices, we know that they act as signals and incentive to producers. So the correct answer has to be boy. Farmers will increase the size of their dairy herds to supply more milk because obviously milk is needed to produce skimmed milk powder. And higher market prices would increase the profit potential, so producers would respond by increasing supply. That's what makes B the correct answer. Others are wrong. A is wrong. Consumers will buy more complements. A is wrong because if skimmed milk powder becomes expensive, consumers are likely to buy less of its complements, not more. So this is incorrect. They won't buy more, they'll buy less complements. C and D are wrong as well. C says firms processing milk into skim milk will switch to producing substitutes. This is wrong because firms will not switch away from skim milk powder when its price has risen and it has become more profitable. So they will not switch. Why would they switch to producing substitutes? Government will introduce a system of rationing. This is incorrect as well because the question says it's a free market and the free market the price rations out things on its own. It's self-adjusting. The government rationing is not a free market response. Remember that, okay? Government doesn't rations out. The price rations out things on its own. Question number 17 says the local. So by the way, 14 and 15 and 16 have been removed. These are externality MCQs. They're now moved to A2. You don't need to solve them. Externality MCQs and cost benefit analysis MCQs. Remember that. Externality, cost benefit analysis, social cost, social benefit MCQs. You don't need to solve it. Question number 17. A local council runs a museum. Then it says that it is used to charge an admission fee. It decided to give entry in the hope of encouraging more people to use the museum and find out about the history of the area, which the council regarded as being important. What can be said about the museum? It is a merit good because it is believed to be worth great attendance. This makes perfect sense, which is the answer as well. It is a merit good because it is run by the local council. Well, it is a merit good, but not because it's run by the local council. That's not what makes it a merit good. So this is incorrect. It is a public good. No, it's not a public good. It's not. This is incorrect. Okay, so. Remember that B is incorrect because something is not automatically a merit good just because the government runs it or the local council runs it. That's not why just because the government runs it doesn't make it a merit good. So this is a merit good because firstly it is under consumed. Merit good is a good that is, what is a merit good? It's a good that is under consumed if left to the free market because consumers will underestimate the benefits due to information failure. We know that, right? So local council believes that more people should visit the museum because knowledge of, maybe local history is something that the council believes is important and valuable. So A is correct because it's believed to be worthy of greater attendance because the museum is considered a merit good because the council believes that society benefits more when people attend it, right? And that is the exact idea behind merit goods, that consumers undervalue them and the government wants to encourage its consumption. Now, museum, libraries, education, healthcare, these are all examples of merit good in MCQs. They usually test this. Question number 18, very much repeated question. I'll understand the logic. It's usually, students find this MCQ difficult. Demand curve for an agricultural commodity and supply curve is shown S1D. The government introduces a buffer scheme to maintain farm incomes at their initial level. So what is the income right now? Income is simply revenue for farmers, that is price times quantity, 5 times 2. So the revenue is $5 times 2,000 tons, which is simply $10,000 of revenue is being earned based on this price. Now the government has said that we'll maintain your 10,000 revenues. Now supply has gone up. There has been a bumper crop. Now obviously if there's been a bumper crop and the prices fall, then these revenues will fall. That's what makes agricultural markets volatile, because incomes go up and down like crazy, and so it's a lot unpredictable. There's a lot of uncertainty. So government intervenes by protecting farmers' incomes. You know that. Now, having said that, what we're seeing, the government has suggested, okay, fine, we'll maintain your 10,000 income. So the supply has gone up. Now, what is the government going to do? Well, the government will buy up this. So the thing is that you need to understand this. So 10,000 is the income that the government has to maintain, and supply has gone up. So which means that if supply has gone up, supply, by the way, initially the supply was 2,000 tons. This was the initial supply. Supply has gone up, right? So supply has gone up to. So let's say the supply has gone up to, by the way, this is just a supply curve. This is modeling different price and quantities, right? But you need to first figure out, step one is to figure out how much the supply gone up. And the supply has gone up the supply has gone up to 5,000 tons. And the thing is, this makes perfect sense, because at 5,000 tons, if you multiply 5 by 2, right, you get $10,000 of income. But the thing is that although supply has gone up to 5,000 tons, but the point is that at a price of, now the thing is that, okay, fine, supply has gone up to 10,000, if supply has gone up to 5,000 tons, then it means that the farmers would start selling at $2. But the point is that there's no demand. I mean, the demand at $2 is just how much? The demand at $2 is just 4,000 tons. So there's a deficit of 1,000 tons. So who will end this deficit? Well, the government would. How would the government do that? The government would simply enter this market, buy up the surplus. When the government enters this market as a buyer, the demand curve shifts to the right. So what the government does is that the government says, okay, fine, hang on. You know what? So now the farmers are still getting how much revenue? The farmers are still getting a revenue of 2 times 5, that is 10,000. But what we're saying is that out of the 5,000, 4,000 tons are being sold to the domestic market consumers, while 1,000 tons will actually be purchased by the government. You need to understand this, because at 5,000, see, the supply has gone up to 5,000 tons. How did you figure that out? Because you need to see supply has gone up. So supply can't really go up to 3,000, because that's not how the farmer's income would be calculated. Because at all the prices above, because at all the prices, I mean, it makes, you understand what I'm saying, right? Because the supply has gone up to the right? So if the supply has shifted to the right, then the amount of supply has to, I mean, because you see the supply is over here. This is the supply curve. It's over here, right? So these are the possible supplies that could actually happen, right? All this area is representing the potential supply. So it's obviously 5,000 tons, right? Multiply, and because at 5,000 tons, you can sell it at $2, which makes 10,000 as revenue. So the farmers are like, okay, fine, now we have 5,000 tons, then help us, because the consumers will only buy 4,000 tons at $2. So the government would buy all this by entering the market in purchasing this surplus. So the government would end up buying this. So the question is saying, what quantity would the government need to buy from the farmers to add to the buffer stock if a bumper harvest causes supply curve to move to S2? The point is, students, that the answer is 1,000 tons, and this is a pretty simple MCQ, because the government would just buy up. And what would the government do with 1,000? It would keep it as a buffer in the warehouse, and during times of shortages, the government will release the stock. Okay, guys, moving on to question 19. Very interesting question. I have a topical playlist that includes competitive advantage videos. Make sure you watch that. It's going to help you a lot. Is the competitive advantage MCQs. The question says, production possibility curve shows the island J's ability to produce fish and fruit. It specializes entirely in fish, which means it has a competitive advantage in fish, and then it trades fish for fruit from island K. So it's specializing in fish, and then it's going to just produce fish and end up exporting some fish to K, and then it's going to import fruit from K. As a result, Island J increases the consumption from 80 tons of fish and 60 tons of fruit from point X to point Y, to 100 tons of fish and 100 tons of fruit. Now, pretty simple. I'll tell you what's happening here. So this is an island. This is the Island J's PPC. It's showing that it could, if it invests all its resources for fish, it will produce 200 tons of fish. If all resources are invested in fruit, 100 tons of fruit will be made. This is Island J, by the way. Now, Island K's figures are not given, but it's clearly given that Island J has a competitive advantage in fish. So if it has a competitive, and right now, Island J is actually producing both fish and fruit. So it's not trading right now. It's just producing both fish and fruit. Now, David Ricardo tells Island J that, okay, fine, dude, you have a fish competitive advantage, specialize in fish. So if it specializes in fish, it produces zero fruit and it diverts all the resources to fish. So how much fish will it make then? It will make 200 fish because that's what the maximum it can make. So we'll end up making 200 fish. So if it ends up making 200 fish, it's making zero fruit. But now, after specialization, it's saying that we have reached point Y, which means that, and that's exactly the beauty of competitive advantage. The beauty of competitive advantage is that the consumption possibility exceeds production possibility. Now, I have plenty of videos on competitive advantage, numericals, and by the way, I've explained the whole goddamn process of competitive advantage. Make sure that you watch those videos on YouTube. And over there, I mentioned that the consumption, so you end up consuming more than what you possibly could before. You couldn't even produce this much before, and now you're actually consuming a lot more, right? So your post-trade versus pre-trade position is quite better. So you end up, so what you do is that, okay, fine. Now what you're going to do is that, okay, fine. So this 80-60 is now useless to us. It's useful just to compare, but now what happens is that now we move to point Y, that now we're consuming, just a second. We're consuming the maximum fruit that we could make. And we're also consuming more fish. We're consuming 100 fish. Now what happens is that we ended up making, after specialization, we ended up making 200 fish, right? And we exported 100 fish to country K. And from country K, we imported 100 fruit. So we exported 100 fish, fruit. We exported 100 fish to country K. We imported 100 fruit from country K. So the ratio has to be 1:1. So what is Island J's exchange rate of fish for fruit? You don't need to calculate competitive advantage. You don't need to figure out that exchange ratio falls between competitive advantage ratios because the ratios, the PBC for Island K is not given. It's already told you that country K is specializing in country J is specializing in fish, and they've also given you the post-trade position. So all what you need to do is that you need to figure out that what is the maximum production after specialization for fish, and then how much is exported and imported. It's pretty simple. It's very obvious because previously we were consuming 80-60 now so previously we were consuming 80 fish, 60 fruit. Now we're consuming 100 fish, 100 fruit. So the gains from trade, that is consumption, rises by 20 fish and 40 fruit. So we have benefited. So again, we ended up making 200 fish. We exported 100 fish to country K, and that's why we're only consuming now 100 fish. And since while we were producing 200 fish, we were producing zero fruit because all resources were diverted there, in which we had a competitive advantage in. And then we imported 100 fruit from country K. So the ratio is 1:1. Got it? 100 fish exported, 100 fruit imported in return. Got it, guys? Now moving on, question number 20. Question number 20 says the table shows the details of GDP and the balance of payment for 4 countries. Which country had the largest net errors and omissions? Now you need to understand that the balance of payment has to balance. It's a balance of payment. So it's a balance sheet or a record of all transactions made internationally. So they have to balance. So the current account has to equal the financial and capital account. And if it does not equal, a balancing item is placed by the name of net errors and omissions. So the correct answer to this MCQ, by the way, is boy. So I'm just doing the calculation for B, and then you can do the rest for yourself and see that why they were incorrect. These are just calculations. So GDP is given, current account balance as a percentage of GDP is given. So you need to calculate the current account in terms of dollars, just like the total of financial and capital account is given. So 50 billion times 2% would give you how much? Would give you times 2% would give you negative 1 billion. So for, your current account value is a deficit of negative 1 billion. Financial and capital account are in a surplus of 3 billion. So it means that in order to sort of balance off the BOP, you need to place the value net errors and omissions, that is negative 2 billion, which will sort of settle the BOP and bring the overall balance to 0, right? So remember that the current account balance plus the capital and the financial account balance plus your net errors and omissions, right, they must equal 0. Got it? Question number 21. 21 says, what would not be the reason for a government to impose a quota on import? Now, quota is a physical limit on the quantity, and the correct answer is B for boy, to raise tax revenue, because a quota does not directly raise tax revenues because quota is not a tax. It simply restricts the volume of imports that are allowed in a country. Right? Tax revenue would be raised by a tariff, not by a quota. Got it? A is correct. A is not the answer as well, because it says what would not be the reason. So preventing dumping could be a reason. A quota may prevent dumping by limiting cheap imports entering the country. That's how. C is incorrect as well. A quota can protect domestic industries from foreign competition, hence reducing the trade deficits. And to support an important industry, obviously a quota can protect domestic industries from foreign competition. So A, C, and D are incorrect. The answer was asking about not. So make sure, again, this is again a distractor or a trap. Make sure that you're aware of these. Question number 22 says, the European Union, EU, imposes a quota on the volume of garments imported from China. Okay, so let's take it slowly now. EU is imposing a quota from the volume of garments imported from China. What is likely to be the effect on the prices received by Chinese garment producers, and on the prices paid by, paid by the consumers of Chinese garments in Europe and the United States? So it says prices received by Chinese producers. Now the thing is that the correct answer for this is basically David, and I'll tell you why. See, if the EU is placing a quota on Chinese garments, what this does is that this reduces the supply of Chinese garments available in Europe, right? So less Chinese garments in Europe, less Chinese garments entering in Europe. And we need to now see what this does. So number one, the price paid by European consumers. Now, the price paid by European consumers for Chinese garments will go up. Why? Because fewer Chinese garments are allowed to now enter Europe, which means the supply would fall in the European market of Chinese garments. And with a lower supply, obviously, European consumers would end up paying a higher price. So the price received by Chinese producers, the price paid by European consumers would rise. Okay, so the answer has to either be B or it has to be D. We can cross out A and C from here. Pretty simple. So ideally, what I tell my students to do is that if 2-3 columns are given, the easiest one, you pick the easiest column for which you're 100% sure, and then you can work out your way throughout the rest. So this is our starting point. Whatever works for you. Prices received by Chinese producers. Now, prices received, number second, let's look at prices that are received by Chinese producers. Now, let's see what happens to them. Now, they would also go up. Why? Because the quota, prices received by Chinese producers, they are also going up, no? They're also going up. Why? Because the quota creates a scarcity in the European market. Because you're limiting the physical quantity of Chinese garments entering in Europe, and that causes a rise in the market price for Chinese garments in Europe because of restricted supply. Now, what we're saying is that for those Chinese garments that are actually being sold at a higher price, they will benefit. So what we're saying is that the quota is creating that scarcity in the European market, and those Chinese producers who are allowed within the quota to sell within the quota, they can receive a higher price because supply is restricted. So prices received by Chinese producers would increase as well. Right? So this would be the answer. Prices paid by US consumers would actually decrease. Now this was a bit hard to figure out, but I'll tell you the reason why prices paid by, what do you mean by prices paid by US consumers? And you might think that what has US to do here? Because it's actually between EU and China. So what has US to do? The thing is that China was exporting a lot to European Union. Now these EU countries imposed a quota on China. So China has unsold stock. So China will sell it to other countries, and let's say one of the markets could be USA. So the Chinese producers may redirect those garments that they cannot sell in Europe to other markets like the US, and the increase in supply in the US market would push price down in the US. Right? So US consumers may end up paying lower prices. That's what make D for David the correct answer. Okay, guys? Nice MCQ. Question 23. The table shows employment statistics. Now you need to know the formulas here. What is the participation rate and unemployment rate? Now labor force participation rate formula is actually labor force divided by the working age population. Now I have a cheat sheet on my website that lists down all the formulas. Make sure that you download that cheat sheet. It must be at your disposal all the time, on lying on your desk. It has the formulas and working for some important things as well, especially things that were introduced from A2 to AS as well. Got it? So make sure that you have it. Labor force participate. This is the formula. So what you'll do is that labor force, and by the way, what is a labor force? Labor force is consists of simply, labor force consists of both unemployed plus the employed. So labor force would be 64, 60 plus 4 divided by working age population 100 times 100. So this is like 64% is the labor force participation rate. Out of the working age population, 64 are economically active. So this is like the labor force participation rate telling you. This is what it is telling you. Unemployment rate is actually calculated unemployed divided by the labor force times 100. Unemployed are 4 upon 64 times 100, which should give you 6.25. So the correct answer for question number 23 has to be D for David. Question number 24. The table shows the changes in the general price level of 4 countries over 3 years expressed as index numbers. Which country experienced a constant fall in the real value? By the way, a constant fall in the real value of money means that the price level is rising at a constant rate. That the percentage jump in inflation rate is constant. If every year prices are going up by 10%, then real value of money is going to fall at a constant rate. This is what it actually means. Got it? So let's see. So option A and B are incorrect. I'll tell you why. You don't even need to calculate option A and B. It's from the face of the MCQ it looks like, because from year 1 to year 2 the index is falling. So prices are falling in year 1 from year 1 to year 2. So obviously this is because now we need to find out those options where prices are, the index is going up. So you cancel out A and B. So it has to be C and D. Now if you look at option number D, from year 1 to year 2, this how do you calculate inflation rate? Inflation rate is calculated by new index. This is the formula: new index minus old index divided by old index times 100. This is how you calculate the percentage change. Times 100 meaning here you're converting it into percentage. So new index is 120 minus 100 upon old index 100 times 100. So that is 20% inflation rate from year 1 to year 2. Now let's calculate from year 2 to year 3. So year 2 index was 120. Year 3 index is 144. So again, new index minus old index, 144 minus 120 divided by 120 times 100 would give you exactly 20%. So that's what makes it correct. But if you look at these answer options, if you look at option number C, from 100 to 8108 index, this is the 8% inflation rate, and from 108 to 116 it would be less than 8%, right? So this is, again, got it? So constant rate in the fall in the real value of money would happen when there's a when percentage change, the rate of inflation is constant. Okay. So I hope this is clear. Question number 25 is again a nice question, I believe. Question number 25 says, in year 1 the price of a barrel of oil increased from 60 to 110. In year 2 there was a further increase to 115. So in year 1, let's say in year 0 it was 60, in year 1 it jumped to 110. So in 1 year, like in the next year, year 1, it jumped to 110. In year 2 it was 115. So so assume that the oil price changes have an immediate impact on general price level and that the CPI weightings are same. What will be the effect of the changes in oil price on the country's CPI and on the inflation rate in year 2 compared with year 1? Now, first things first, the CPI is going up because the index is going up. Index rises. This is an index, dude. This is the index. Sorry, this is the price of the barrel of oil. So if the price of the barrel of oil is going up, the consumer price index will end up going up, right? And there has been no change in the where is it? There's been no change in the weighting or the ranking of oil. So if there's no change in the ranking of oil either, and the prices of oil are going up, the CPI will go up. So it has to be either C or D. So you cancel out A and B, because in A and B it says decrease. So you cancel that out. So it has to be C or D. But the inflation rate will be decreasing. And I'll tell you why. Because if you calculate the percentage change, I mean, look at the jump. See, the rate of inflation will decrease because in year 2, the increase in the price of oil was much smaller than the increase in the price of oil in year 1. It jumped from 60 to 110 in year 1, and in year 2, it only jumped from 110 to 150. You can calculate the percentage change as well. So the effect on the rate of inflation would be that the rate of inflation would decrease, although CPI will not increase. There's still inflation, but the rate is decreasing. So there's disinflation. So the CPI is increasing, it's going up, but the rate of inflation is falling because you can clearly see the jump in the price level was much more in year 1 than in year 2. So that is what C is the correct answer for question number 25. 26. Why is a deficit on the current account of the BOP in economics in a freely floating exchange rate often thought to be an economic problem? It implies a net outflow of capital from the economy. Now, A should not be correct, because a deficit on the current account of the BOP would be, a current account deficit, what do you mean by it? It simply means that the country is spending more on imports, and it's spending more on imports and income payments and transfers than it is actually earning from exports and income receipts, right? Now, the thing is that this current account deficit has to be financed by borrowing from abroad, or let's say selling assets to foreigners, because you need to balance off the current account deficit. As far as A is concerned, it says it implies a net outflow of capital from the economy. This is incorrect, because a current account deficit is usually matched by a capital, or let's say a financial account surplus. In the ideal scenario, in the most idealistic scenario, well, let's say there's no, in the most idealistic scenario, let's say it balances off. So a current account deficit would be usually matched by a capital / a financial account surplus, meaning that net capital. This is actually, by the way, if you're saying that you have a current account deficit, you have a current account deficit which is actually offset by a capital and a financial account surplus, then the fact that there's a capital financial account surplus is representing a net inflow of capital, not a net outflow. So this is incorrect. A is incorrect. C says it leads to an increase in unemployment. Now, this is a very strong comment that it has been made. This is very strong to say, because a current account deficit, by the way, a current account deficit may contribute to unemployment, but it does not always directly leads to it. So this is not the best possible option. Although it's not incorrect, there might be a contribution, but not the best possible option, as told to you guys before as well. Sometimes the fight is not between two right and wrong answers, but between the best possible answers. It results in a loss of foreign exchange reserves. This is incorrect, because it's a free floating exchange rate system. Central bank does not have to use reserves to defend the fixed exchange rate, because it's a free floating exchange rate. This is incorrect. It involves borrowing from abroad, and this is correct, because you have to understand that borrowing from abroad can become a problem, because it may create future debt repayments and interest payments, and the fact that future reliance and dependence on foreign borrowing and foreign finance. So if you have a huge ballooning current account deficit, this will usually be met by borrowing from abroad, or maybe selling assets to foreigners, and that's a problem. Okay, question number 27 says, in which situation must a country balance of trade and goods and services to improve? A balance of trade and goods and services improve. Question number 27. Export cost, export price is ridiculous. Options A and B this is very simple. Export revenues rise more than imports. This is correct. The balance of trade and goods and services would depend upon the value. But this would depend upon the value of exports and imports, not just simply the price or the volume of imports and exports separate. It doesn't really depends upon this separately or this separately, but together this value, right? C is correct. That's why we're saying export revenues and import rise more than import revenues, right? So if export revenues rise more than import revenues technically negative import revenues, which is technically import expenditures. So the value of exports have risen relative to imports, and the balance of trade may improve. Question number 28 A8 is now moved to A2. It's a fixed exchange rate question. Move to A2. Question 29. It's again a fixed exchange rate. This is again a question that is now going to be tested in A2, not in AS. Question 30. Let's look at question 30. It's part of your syllabus. This is a good question. It says a country experiences a significant appreciation in the foreign exchange rate. A significant appreciation, by the way, means that the currency gets stronger, right? So, which statement correctly describes the most likely combination of the effects? The first answer option says aggregate demand rises and international competitiveness fall. This is incorrect because aggregate demand is likely to fall, not rise. Why? Because of lower net exports. A currency appreciation will reduce the net exports. So A is correct. B is also wrong. Exporters' profit rise and terms of trade worsen. B is wrong because exporters' profits are likely to fall and not rise because exports will fall. Definitely because of a currency appreciation, it makes the currency stronger. It increases the price of exports and most likely reduce the exports and hence reduce the profits as well for exporters. D is wrong. The current account deficit falls and production cost rises. D is wrong because a current account deficit is likely to worsen, not fall, because of falling net exports and production cost. Production costs may rise. In fact, production costs may fall if imports are cheaper because, currency appreciation reduces the price of imports, right? It makes exports expensive, but imports get cheaper. So production costs could fall, especially if you're importing key raw materials, right? So the answer is basically, what is the answer? The answer option, we are left with C for Charlie. But let's say why C is correct. Because an appreciation would make your imports cheaper. Because the currency gets stronger, the price of import goes down. It makes imports cheaper. And this will reduce imported inflation. It reduces imported inflation, especially, and it results in lower production costs for firms that use imported raw materials, so inflation may fall. Well, on the other hand, what happens is, so inflation falls in this context, in this aspect, while exports become more expensive because price of exports goes up, while imports become cheaper to domestic consumers. This will actually, so exports getting expensive, and this would mean it. So your exports falling and imports going up means net exports falling. Falling net exports are a component of AD. This reduces AD, and that could create unemployment, especially in your export industries, especially if your exports massively fall, right? So the likely combination is inflation falls, unemployment rises. And this is more of a macro question. This is a macro question, but you need to be very clear on the macroeconomic impacts of appreciation and depreciation. These usually come, the macroeconomic impacts. You should be very, very clear on this. So that's all, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.